In 1970, my grandfather traveled from Hong Kong to visit Expo 70, the first ever World's Fair held in Japan, specifically in Suita, Osaka. In 2022, I embarked on a year-long adventure studying abroad at a university in that very same city, though I didn't know it at the time. At one point, I even circled the Tower of the Sun, staring up at this odd structure, without realizing I was walking the same grounds he was almost 50 years ago. After discovering my grandfather's film slides from his trip, and learning Osaka was going to be hosting the expo once again in 2025, I knew this was the right time for a homecoming. But that's a story for a different time. In September, I packed my bags and my dad's old film camera and set off to visit the World Expo, just like my grandfather did 55 years earlier. Walking out of Yumeshima Station, I was immediately faced with my first massive hour-long line just to get in the entrance gates of the expo, which was a good tone setter for the rest of my experience. In my limited prior research, I had heard more than enough about the logistics I could expect during my time here, from the multiple hour-long queues for the best pavilions to the poorly designed reservation system, the latter of which I had already experienced firsthand, having not secured a single pavilion reservation for any of my 3 days at the expo before arriving. So unsurprisingly, my first day was a bit underwhelming, and I spent most of my time just getting my bearings and exploring anything that didn't have a few hour-long commitment to it. That included walking the perimeter of the giant wooden ring that surrounds the main part of the island, that I had heard pretty unanimously was one of people's favorite parts of the expo, and making sure I caught the drone show later that night. But if you know me, you know I take these things seriously, so by the time I stepped through the gates on my second day, I was prepared with a tentative plan for the rest of my time at the expo, and led to me bolting to the line for the China Pavilion first thing in the morning. In addition to countries I was already somewhat familiar with, I was also excited to learn more about some I knew very little about, leading to me spending more time than I'd like to admit camping just outside the entrance to the Malaysia Pavilion, waiting to jump in line as soon as they opened it back up. Besides the larger pavilions, I also knew I wanted to visit some of the commons, large halls that held many smaller booths for countries without their own dedicated buildings. Inside, I found myself encountering places I'd never even heard of before, and also getting to see countries that were on my list, like Ukraine, whose pavilion was a powerful statement of resistance in the midst of an ongoing war, and Croatia, another country that's part of my heritage. I also couldn't resist taking advantage of my connections to skip what was probably at least a 4-hour-long line and see how America was presenting itself to the rest of the world. Or to Japan, I guess, given that most tours, including mine, were entirely in Japanese, and how heavily the pavilion was pushing its cute mascot named Spark.
Knowledge can light up the dark, and it all starts with a spark. Together, just imagine what we can learn from each other. Together, improving the world begins with a dream. Together, think of all the ideas we'll share with each other. Together, we can change the world if we dream.
As I made my way through the expo checking things off my list, I found myself wondering what my grandfather's experience was like, how he felt about everything, and the lines for everything. The line for the bathroom, the line for the water bottle fillers, the line for the escalators. That's assuming it was this busy back then too. And how did he choose what pavilions to see? When he walked through them, what drew his attention? Besides just learning about all these different countries, I'm specifically drawn to art, food, sustainability, and culture, which made a signature pavilion that was a mixture of all of those, Earthmart, a perfect fit for my interests, and I was thrilled to end up getting a same-day reservation for it after some diligent research, planning, and of course, a decent helping of luck. Now, this should be the part of the video where I would talk about what the expo meant to my grandfather, or the reasons he went to so many. But I'm committed to remaining truthful, and the truth is, I don't know any of that. I don't have any compelling story to tell here. And to be honest, I don't know that much about my grandfather, or his life, or anything. I had a realization only just before I left that at the time he attended Expo 70, my grandparents wouldn't have even immigrated to America yet. And honestly, it makes me feel pathetic. To be so ignorant to the history and the lives of these people I grew up seeing all the time. And now that they're past the point where they're able to share stories like these, it makes me realize how much time I wasted, how much I lost out on. And not knowing any of it makes me feel not Chinese. But it's not like this history is gone forever. It still lives on in the people that know my grandfather, and those who got to share these experiences with him.
What I remember about going to the expo was visiting all the pavilions from the different countries, many of which were like little places I'd never heard of, like, little islands in the Caribbean or, things like that. And then many of them had a little passport stamp that you could collect in your little passport book. So we would go around and, we'd go visit the pavilion and then make sure we got our little passport stamps so we could collect all the different places that we had been to. And it was fun to kind of just look at even the design of the stamp for each of the different countries and see what they chose to put on there.
Yeah.
So that was kind of fun.
So the World's Fair were fun, and I think we did buy food at the World's Fair, which was unusual for us when we traveled. My most vivid memory from the Vancouver one was there was a pavilion where they had props and models from like science fiction shows. I mean, the ones I remember specifically where they had like the models from, V, the original one, obviously, not the bastardized new one. Anyway, V was timely at the when we went, so I think there was some like Battlestar Galactica stuff and some other stuff there too. But I had a good time seeing those and taking photos of them and stuff. But yeah, no, it was fun.
And of course, I have a desire to travel and to, learn and see about different countries anyway. So that was kind of like a neat way to be able to do it in this very small area of the expo grounds, to be able to kind of hit all these different places. You don't have to fly everywhere, and all that. And then the other aspect of it was it gave you some idea, well, where are the places you might want to explore further in real life, right? Here's a little tiny taste. If it seems intriguing, then, it kind of inspires you to go and do a little deeper dig into, what else is there that you would want to see later.
Why do you think that Yeh Yeh went to so many of these, right? Like, was it the fact that he's going to see stuff from around the world?
I think it's what it was. I think my dad always liked traveling, but he didn't get to travel as much and as extensively as he would have liked. So the World Expo sort of gave him a way to see stuff from around the world without having to go.
I think he enjoyed just seeing new things, and experiencing new things. It was just his way of, exploring the world around him. Now, I don't know that he was the kind of person who would read all the displays and everything that you saw, but he enjoyed seeing the sights themselves, seeing architecture, seeing the statues, seeing, temples, people in traditional dress. I think all of those things interested him, and he had a curiosity about them. And so, when he was younger, he really enjoyed doing a lot of travel. And even when we came to the United States and, he had the whole family, so it was less practical to do like flying to faraway places with a family of 6. So then we got the van and, drove around. But he liked exploring, lots of different things. And so this was kind of like a compromise, thing of being able to, do international travel without the expense of doing international travel, but still get to explore all these different cultures and places and see what's interesting in each of them. Yeah, so I think that was some of his interest in that sort of thing. And that's one of the things that I'm grateful that he's had a lot of opportunity during his life, to travel. because when my parents both first retired, at first they weren't really doing a whole lot of traveling, and I really encouraged them to go and travel because, you're not always going to be able to. There will come a day when, your health or whatever thing's going to make it hard for you to travel. So while you can, you should try and go and do more travel. And they actually did. Even though they always thought they didn't have enough money to do a lot of travel, they still got out there. They went to visit, my aunt in New Zealand. They did trips to Europe. They did trips back to China and Asia. And now that, we're spending so much time sorting through their stuff, and I go through their photos and stuff, and there are things that I don't even remember them having gone on some of these trips, but there's like, oh, here's photos of them, in Europe and on this cruise and, all this stuff. And, I'm happy when I see that because I wanted them to be able to do some of those things, and especially for my dad to get exposed to some of these things that he wanted to. And yet he was, while we were growing up, he was too busy working to have the time or the money, to go off and do those things. And I was very glad that while he still could enjoy it, he actually took the time to do that, instead of waiting until later when it might have been too late for him to actually enjoy some of those things.
So even though it's not the same as being able to hear about this all firsthand, it means a lot to learn even a little bit more about his experiences and share all the conversations it sparks along the way. The truth is, I wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for him. I wouldn't have been so interested in the expo if I didn't know about his fascination with them and that he went to one in Osaka all that time ago. And really, nothing about my life would be the way it is without everything he went through. So I'm thankful for every opportunity I get to learn a little bit more about what this crazy thing called life was like for him and for his children. Thank you, Yeh Yeh, for this experience and for everything.